Welcome back to the Splash Live, Greater West Bloomfield's live daily news and talk show. I'm Tyler Kieft alongside Diane Chabon as fiscal year 2023 is nearing its close. Oakland County Executive David Coulter, as well as the Board of Commissioners, the Finance Committee in Oakland County, all discussing the 2024 fiscal year budget. And David Coulter earlier in a couple weeks ago in July and near the end of July proposing a $1.09 billion budget to the Board of Commissioners and to the Finance Committee in Oakland County, looking forward to 2024. Now, COVID money starting to trickle out of the economy from the federal government and allocated to local communities from the state government. How is that going to impact our budget here in Oakland County in 2024? Here to join us for some analysis and to look at how that may affect your community is Dr. Michael Greiner, Assistant Professor of Management at Oakland University's School of Business Administration. Dr. Greiner, thank you for being with us.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you on. As Peg McNichol from the Oakland Press in an article about this proposed budget called in her subtitle for this particular article that she wrote about it, that they're expecting some belt tightening in Oakland County in 2024, kind of par for the course for a lot of individual communities and counties in Michigan and across the board, particularly because that COVID-19 relief money from the federal government starting to trickle its way out of the economy and come to its sunset.
Yeah, it is kind of challenging right now for communities because, we had this big boost of funds coming from the federal government with the ARPA funds resulting from the COVID crisis. And, they come to an end. And so basically you see some efforts by the county to try to address this. One of the things that I like about the way that Oakland County has approached its budget is that they budget on a 3-year basis. So they're trying to look at the big picture here and realize that sometimes these investments that they make, if they're going to continue on into the future, they might not necessarily have the funds going on into the future. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. So, for example, one of the things that they're trying to do is they've had a big success with the program to essentially provide counseling to small business owners in Oakland County. And that was something that was funded with COVID relief funds. And so now what they're trying to do is that they're trying to move it off the county budget and essentially turn it into a nonprofit organization that will do separate counseling with individual business owners, separate from the county funds, not relying on the county for funding anymore. And I think that's a good approach because they were basically used the county funds that they received from the federal government as seed money to start this program. And now that it's a program that's grown, I believe, to about 4,500 people being counseled, that is a large enough program now that hopefully it'll become self-sustaining and something that the county no longer needs to provide the money for. And that's kind of the challenge that they have when they get these one-time funds, which again, we've talked about this before, is if they get a bunch of money, say the county says, oh, we want to hire a bunch of sheriff's deputies. Well, the sheriff's deputies, that cost continues on for years after those funds end. So where's that money going to come from? And we've seen it in some other communities where they've actually had to cut. But Oakland County, I think, has made some wise decisions in terms of really trying to use the money more as seed money to start programs, which then it's able to offload.
Yeah, and among some of those programs that they're starting was converting the Business Forward program that was in part catalyzed by the ARPA funding, the American Rescue Plan Act funding from the federal government, moving that instead into what's now going to be a nonprofit called Oakland Thrive that launched in March with $17 million from ARPA funding and will continue as a nonprofit going forward. But across the board, also inflation playing a role in this new budget. As we look at the past few years of budgeting in 2021, when the county began to start budgeting on that 3-year basis, the budgets were around $970 million, with the final budget in 2022 coming out to $971.2 million, according to the Oakland Press. Now we're seeing that number reach over that $1 billion mark, with the proposed budget for the next 3 years beginning at $1.09 billion. And so how is that also playing a factor into especially these individual departments and their budgets down the line, those line items going forward?
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. I mean, we have to remember that when you're talking about government, by far the biggest expenditure that government's going to have is employee salaries. Now, most of the employees that the county has, of course, are unionized. So their salaries and benefits are governed by the union contracts between the county and the various unions. Now, as I understand it, most of those union contracts right now are settled. So the county really has no discretion in terms of how it's going to address that. So then what you do is you look at the relatively small number of employees who are non-unionized. And there the challenge is that essentially they're competing on the open market for these employees. And of course, as we know, private employers are right now boosting wages to try to compete for employees because of the fact that there is this tight labor market that's been pushing up the employee wages, part of what's been driving inflation. So as a result of that, the county knows that they want to increase the wages for these other employees so that they're competitive on the open market. But at the same time, they don't want to increase it so much that it creates a fiscal burden that on long term for the county. Because again, coming back to the issue of how the county deals with long-term budgeting, employee wage increases tend to build on themselves. So for example, this year they're talking about a 3% increase. Next year they're talking about another 3% increase. Then the following year, another 3% increase. Well, that ends up being more than a 9% increase because you have to remember it's 3% increase plus 3% increase on the prior 3% increase. So it ends up essentially compounding and increasing the cost quite a bit. So this is kind of part of the challenge here that the county has, which is that on the one hand, they have very few employees that they're really able to essentially manage their costs on. On the other hand, they also need to provide wages and benefits that are competitive on the open market, which is very challenging right now, given the inflationary environment that we're in. But also then, you've got the fact that the county needs to be cognizant of the kind of the long-term trends here, which are that they're not going to have these huge increases in funds that they've had in the past. So it's really kind of a big balancing act that you're seeing the county executive doing right now.
Peg McNichol from the Oakland Press noting in her article on this budget that managers in these individual departments are being asked by the county executive to lean out their budgets for the next few years to be able to achieve some of those things you're talking about, offsetting the loss in funding coming from the ARPA funds to offset inflation and the impact on increased costs, but also to make sure that they're able to retain employees and maintain what they've had in terms of their ability to output what they do each and every day, department by department. And Dr. Greiner, with this being the case on a county-wide level, how's that affecting individual municipalities too? Because I'd imagine if the county is going to be having these problems, these individual municipalities are going to be having that maybe 10, 25% greater than what the county has.
Oh, for sure. And we can see that with the ARPA funds, for example. I mean, the county has essentially said that the last batch of ARPA funds that's going to be distributing to the individual communities within the county is going to be happening by this October. So you're seeing an end coming to it. And I think we've talked about, for example, Madison Heights and Royal Oak Township and some other communities in Oakland County that really are looking at their budgets now and realizing that on a long-term basis, they've really got a big problem going forward. So I think that's something that is that all communities are going to be watching very closely. But one thing I want to emphasize too is we can't become too negative here. There's this idea that we have that the economy is doing so badly, but yet all the indications that we're seeing overall seem to be pointing more and more at a soft landing, that the economy is going to continue to do well, that we're not going to be falling into a big recession. And indeed, the county executives team pointed that out when they were talking about the long-term prospects here, that yes, we can't expect these big increases. Yes, we need to manage the drop-off of the COVID-related funds. But by the same token, we're hopeful now that we're not going to see a big recession coming, which would then seriously impact the county and the local community's long-term budgets. So I think that this effort to try to be more lean in their operations is something that's really positive. But also, we can't overstate the fact that there's a lot positive to be said about this county. One thing I think that's worth applauding in terms of what the county is doing, and certainly as a business professor, I'm really thrilled to see, is that they're making some investments to try to ensure the long-term economic viability and competitiveness of the county. So, for example, we see that in public transportation, something that has been shown to be a priority of businesses in terms of where they locate. Well, of course, as we know, last year the voters, excuse me, approved a millage increase specific for public transportation. And the county has really dived into that with both feet. And they've worked with SMART and with some other local transportation organizations to increase the public transportation access that we have across the county. And that's something that's a priority for businesses. Additionally, we see the efforts by the county to try to encourage people to get higher education, to try to make availability of community college in particular more affordable for county residents. And that's been something that has been shown to be something that really is attractive to businesses. So I think that there's a lot positive to be said here. And, sometimes we end up focusing too much on the negative. But, Oakland County is still a great place to do business. And we can see in this budget that we're continuing to make some investments to make sure that continues on into the future.
Yeah, the way that this proposed budget has been pieced together, and from discussions that have been had from those in charge of proposing this budget and involved in formulating this budget, have kind of been a sense of cautious optimism given the state the economy is in, looking at a reduced chance of there being a recession, but still keeping that in the back of their minds as they're planning for the next 3 years of Oakland County's budget. Dr. Greiner, thank you so much for joining us to give us a little bit more insight into the thought of Oakland County Executive David Coulter and others involved in proposing this budget for 2024 and beyond.
It's great to be here, and have a great weekend.
Thanks. You as well, Dr. Greiner. Oakland County Commissioner will vote on whether to approve or deny the budget on September 21st. They have plenty of more meetings ahead, including on their schedule a hearing for spending on diversity, equity, and inclusion, environmental stability, human resources, public communications, and the Oakland County Board of Commissioners budget coming up on August 8th. You can keep up to date on all the information you need to know about these budget discussions at the county level from their different committees and the Board of Commissioners by visiting oakgov.com and navigating to their clerks page to find all the minutes and the agendas for those meetings, as well as meeting dates, so you can participate and have your public comment heard, as well as it is your tax dollars that are involved in this budgeting.